Hello, gang. Hope everyone is well. We are nearing the end of the semester. We are getting really close. So hang in there. I know this class is a lot of work. Hopefully, you've learned something from it so far. We're into some positive, uh, endearing human qualities like intimacy and attraction and helping behaviors. And we'll talk about peacemaking next week, which is hopefully will be. Poignant, relevant coming up upon Thanksgiving. So I'm entertaining a week off for everybody at some point. I don't know that it'll be next week, but perhaps the week afterwards. I don't know. I may give y'all a short week for Thanksgiving. I know this has been a lot of work, and I appreciate the effort that people have given to this class. Honestly, I can tell that for the most part, people are digging in. You appear to be gaining something from this, and that's really the point of going to school, is to learn something. So let's go through this one. I felt like I needed to give a video presentation just because this is something that is endearing to me. It piques my interest because I have a degree in theology, and so a lot of our moral behaviors come from our spiritual backgrounds. And so I'm going to talk about helping behaviors just briefly. Now, bear with me, and I apologize. This is red. This really itches. I don't know if I got bit right here or something. So sorry if there's a red streak. I can see it in the recording. So altruism is really a theme that we're paying close attention to this week. So you can see the definition: a motive to increase another's welfare without conscious regard for one's own self-interests. So, in other words, sometimes even at one's own personal expense, you deal with working through altruism. So I'm going to not really go into a lot of detail. There's some theories about why we're altruistic. Some of them may be selfish. We may expect something in return, like that social exchange theory. And also, I've brought back in our PowerPoint slides a lot of illustrations with the cognitive triangle, our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So think about that. We're going to bring that back and hopefully apply that to our discussion this week and how they all relate to one another. So there's something called the do-good, feel-good effect. So this would be in terms of how our behaviors actually impact our mood. So bring that idea back, where the behaviors start to influence our feelings, which then influence our thoughts. So it seems backwards intuitively, but we've covered that earlier on in our semester. So again, what we do then affecting our feelings and our thoughts and our beliefs. So who helps others? So it looks like men whose physiological responses and self-reports revealed the most arousal in response to another's distress also gave the most help. So that would indicate that empathy has something to do with it. If you can actually put yourself in someone else's shoes. We're going to come back to empathy later. The ACE study, which we didn't really talk about in this class, but it indicates that people that tend to go into helping professions also have experienced significantly negative events in their lives. So it's like, because you've gone through bad things, you also want to help others out to alleviate the problems that emanate from the bad experiences. I think it's important to recognize that children seem to understand empathy. 2-year-olds are more likely to offer toys to a peer when playthings are scarce rather than plentiful. So if you have kids and you have trouble sharing, try taking everything away and just leave them with one toy. You might think, well, we're going to really have a battle. But when things are, or maybe just leave a couple, when things are scarce, 2-year-olds tend to share more. So it's kind of like, do they get it more than adults? Let's see here. There's a couple other bullet points on there. I'm trying to go a little quickly. So now let's talk about how feelings may influence behaviors. And there's something called the reciprocity norm, the expectation that people will help, not hurt those who have helped them. And 21-month-old infants are more likely to help those who try to give them a toy. So even, there's a reciprocity. How I feel about that person may influence how I behave toward them. There's also something called a social responsibility norm. the expectation that people will help those needing help without regard for future exchanges. Something called social capital also in there. So there's also something that happens to the individual. That would be explanation when the outside world, if somebody gives to another person, it impacts us, like those 21-month-olds. Like, well, they helped me, so I feel like I should probably help them. Empathy-induced altruism. There's a study by Batson in 2011. It shows that the vicarious experience of another feelings, putting oneself in another's shoes, produces sensitive helping. It inhibits aggression, increases cooperation, and improves attitudes towards stigmatized groups. So think about this later, because there'll be a discussion question that will almost exactly relate to that. There are some limitations. It can lead to burnout. If you're always empathetic with somebody and their condition doesn't get any better, it can lead you to compassion fatigue. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings influence behaviors, and beliefs influence behaviors. So what influences helping? There's some things that influence helping behaviors. One of them is the bystander effect. So this kind of brings back our concept of social loafing. So the chart I'm showing right here is the number of people who report smoke. Let's say that they're afraid that something's on fire. This comes from a study in 1968, but there are also studies that have replicated this example, where if there are a bunch of people in a group, we assume that the other person is going to actually help and do it. So, in other words, if there was just one person alone and you smelled smoke and you knew nobody else was around, you're more likely to call the fire department and get some help. Whereas if you have an office full of people, you're like, yeah, somebody else probably took care of that. That's not my responsibility. So I think it's important that we can actually experience social loafing when it comes to helping, when it comes to helping other people. And I think you could also extend that to bigger problems in our society. Well, that charitable group will take care of that person. That person's suffering really doesn't matter because somebody will take care of him. But often that's not the case. So unless you do it, unless you're the change that you want to see in the world, nothing's going to change. We do tend to help others in our own group. That's what this slide. So we bring back some negativity. There was an experiment in England, and it talked about, or was it Scotland? It was in the British Isles, and so they had some folks wear a Manchester shirt versus a Liverpool shirt, and those are soccer teams, football teams, and a Manchester fan was way less likely to help a person that was wearing a Liverpool shirt. So a Manchester fan would readily help somebody who had a Manchester shirt on. So they also tried to qualify this research by later going back and adding a control group to it and saying that, we're doing a study on football fans and their behaviors. And so then it tended to negate that impact of that person's shirt, that, hey, that Liverpool fan, even though there are a few less people that the Manchester group helped out, knowing that they're, talking about the attributes of a football fan, they helped out the Manchester group. But then you see that same group bias happening with the plain shirt. Then they didn't help people with the plain shirt on. So it's like, that in-group bias. In-group folks tend to help their in-group members. Again, there's another study. This is on figure 12.9 in page 466 of your textbook. How there was a computer program, and it was kind of like what I'm doing right now. It took a video of the person's face, and then melded it with another face, and then asked them if they were more likely to help. And so they compared, you see the face on the far left with the face in the middle, which is a composite of the girl on the right. So they then asked the girl, who are you more likely to help? Or they talked about, and so, tell me how likely you would be to help this stranger. And then so people who found that they actually help people who look more like them. So again, we tend to help those who are similar to us. Helping in religious engagement, that's an important topic. So you can go to figure 12.10, and people who are highly religious tend to give more, looking at people that are less religious. However, I will say that effect is mitigated when you add in the effect of income. So people with incomes below 50,000 tend to give almost double the amount of their income, or excuse me, they give in percentage of their income versus people who make over 100,000. So that's consistent study after study after study, year after year. Uh, Poorer people tend to be more generous, relatively speaking. Evolutionary psychology. So you guys can look through that to see about how helping behaviors might have evolved through our existence here. And I'm going to move into an example I've already discussed, but I'm going to talk about a few of these examples. So I'm going to stop the recording here and then come back to talk about these 4 examples from different spiritual perspectives.